But first, today's historic peace deal between Israel and Hamas has exploded ridiculous narratives that we've been sold over the past 2 years. False narratives about Israel the monster, Trump the tyrant, Albanese the statesman, and about pro-Palestinian protestors who wouldn't know peace if it hit them with a placard. First and foremost, today's peace deal explodes the idea that Israel has been committing a genocide in Gaza. You'll recall the script, Israel, the heartless aggressor intent on erasing Palestinians from existence. Well, today's events do tend to ruin that narrative. Consider what actually happened today. Hamas agreed to release all the hostages being held in Gaza, and Israel immediately agreed to end the war, just like that. It turns out genocidal maniacs are remarkably easy to dissuade. All you've got to do is give their kidnapped citizens back. This was never about Israel trying to wipe the Palestinian people from the face of the earth. As we've been repeatedly told, the conflict began when Hamas decided to turn southern Israel into a slaughterhouse, butchering 1,200 people while dragging 250 underground as hostages. The conflict ended when Hamas agreed to return the hostages to their families. Why didn't Hamas think of that 2 years ago? Come to think of it, why didn't Hamas just refrain from murdering Jews and taking hostages in the first place? Not being evil never seemed to have occurred to them. But of course, if they'd not done what they had done, well, and followed the path of radical Islamists, there'd be no viral footage, no global protests, and let's be honest, there wouldn't have been this.
Effective today, Sunday, the 21st of September 2025, the Commonwealth of Australia recognises the state of Palestine.
More on Anthony Albanese shortly, but today proved there is no genocide. There never was. All Hamas ever had to do in order to end the suffering of the Palestinian people was to release the hostages. And it's sad for the Palestinian people that it took Gaza being pummeled for 2 years before they finally saw sense. Which brings me to the second narrative that's exploded by this deal. The lie that pro-Palestinian protesters in the West are interested in peace and concerned for Palestinian lives. It's curious to me that the protesters never marched for the release of hostages, not once. There were chants to free Palestine, but never to free hostages. There were chants to globalise the Intifada, but never to give Jewish babies back to their families. Far from it. Pro-Palestine supporters went around the Melbourne and Sydney CBDs defacing and destroying posters calling for Jewish hostages to be freed. And rather than protesting against Hamas, rather than urging the terrorists to release the innocents who were taken captive, pro-Palestinians chanted in support of Hamas, waved Hamas flags and held aloft images of Hamas leaders. As was proved today, the release of the hostages was all that was needed to stop the bombings. But while some extreme pro-Palestinian demonstrators have been busy chanting death, death to the IDF, well, they've been more busy doing that. In fact, so busy, they haven't had time to worry about things that would actually end the war. We all know what from the river to the sea means. It means it was never about peace. If it was about peace, the demonstrators would be cancelling Sunday's planned demonstration. But they're not, are they? The third myth exploded by today's peace deal is that the Albanese government's decision to recognise a Palestinian state was anything other than reckless theatrics. It most certainly wasn't helpful. I was interested in the joint statement put out today by Prime Minister Albanese and his Foreign Minister Penny Wong, in which they wrote, and I quote, "Australia has consistently been part of international calls for a ceasefire, return of the hostages, and the unimpeded flow of aid to Gaza." Now, note their language because it betrays them. Notice they've consistently called for a ceasefire before they've called for the return of hostages. Even in their statement, the hostages come second. Well, I'm sorry, but expecting Israel to lay down its arms before the release of the hostages is to ask what no mother or father whose children have been stolen would ever do. The Albanese government fancy themselves as the moral compass of the Pacific, but they keep reading the map upside down. From the very beginning, The Albanese government has dealt in fantasies and muddled priorities. The statement continued, get a load of this. We urge all parties to respect the terms of the plan. Now, again, their language betrays them, all parties, as if the deal is between moral equivalents rather than Israel, a liberal democracy, who are now shaking hands with the devil. Hamas is a terrorist organisation, but you'd never know it reading Albanese and Wong's statement. Have a look at the next part. Quote, Australia strongly supports the plan's commitment to denying Hamas any role in the future governance of Gaza. There's a very long road to recovery in Gaza, securing long-term peace and building the Palestinian state. Together with our partners, Australia will continue to do what we can to contribute to a just and enduring two-state solution. Again, the emphasis is all wrong. The past 2 years has been about Israel trying to rescue its hostages. That's what precipitated this entire thing. The Albanese government makes the past 2 years all about building a Palestinian state. Now, if that's not an encouragement to more terrorism, I don't know what is. The next line must have hurt. I quote, we thank President Trump for his diplomatic efforts. Oh boy, they must have written that through gritted teeth. Which brings me conveniently to the fourth narrative exploded by today's peace deal. For the past 10 years, we've been told Donald Trump is Beelzebub, a Nazi, a dangerous demagogue who will lead the world off a cliff and into World War III. Instead, he's the only man since the Son of God who's managed to bring peace to the Middle East on a Monday. I had to laugh at CNN's coverage of today's announcement.
Blessed are the peacemakers indeed, but it is worth pointing out this is a ceasefire deal, right? This is not a larger peace deal about a Palestinian state of any sort and who gets to rule a Palestinian state and Israel gets security guarantees, how and all that. That is still TBD, right?
This is a ceasefire deal. This is not a larger peace deal. You can always rely on CNN to find a dark cloud on any sunny day. I can't imagine how depressed they're going to be watching the hostages come home to their families. Speaking of which, Trump phoned the families of Israeli hostages today to personally tell them their loved ones were coming home.
The hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
All of them.
I think now is as good a time as any to say, could you have imagined any of this under a Kamala Harris presidency? So there you have it. After 2 years of bloodshed, peace broke out. Not because of hashtags, not because of protests, not because of international pressure from Anthony Albanese, but because one side finally stopped behaving like demons. And if that's what it takes to end a war, well, maybe the next peace deal should start by asking activists, bureaucrats and prime ministers to try the same.